Good evening. Please continue. Continue, madam. You are audible, very audible.
And respected seniors and dear to all us, Dr. Sharda ma'am, I hope in this time of pandemic, all of my friends and dear ones are following social distancing, washing their hands for the designated 20 seconds, and keeping their health and the priority of their dear ones as number one. Because you live only once, and if it is done in the right way, that once is enough. So I start with my talk on letrozole, rebirth of a legacy. Infertility, as we know, is failure to achieve clinical pregnancy after 12 months of regular unprotected sexual intercourse. Ovarian dysfunction is one of the major causes of infertility, which consists of oligo-ovulatory and anovulatory women who need the assistance of ovulation-inducing agents to achieve pregnancy. WHO classification of anovulation, we have been reading since our graduation times. Nevertheless, just a brief recap, patients who belong to group 1, they require gonadotrophins to ovulate. Patients who belong to category 2 are the ones diagnosed with having PCOS. They need insulin sensitizers and ovulation-inducing agents. Those belonging to group 3, they require oocyte donation. Now, Rotterdam criteria has made it very easy for us to diagnose PCOS. There are 3 criteria, out of which 2 have to be met for it to be labeled as PCOS. The 3 criteria are polycystic ovarian morphology and ultrasound, signs symptoms of hyperandrogenism and insulin resistance, and irregular periods. Now, why does anovulation occur in a patient with PCOS? We are very well aware of the negative feedback exerted by estrogen on the hypothalamus pituitary. In patients with PCOS, there is supraphysiological levels of estrogen. So the feedback on hypothalamus pituitary is stronger, leads to low GnRH secretion, low FSH, no follicle develops, and there is anovulation. The various oral ovulation-inducing agents available in the market, we have SERMs. These consist of clomiphene citrate and tamoxifen. And then there are aromatase inhibitors, which consist of letrozole and anastrozole. Then there are bromocriptine, cabergoline, and metformin. The primary goal of all these ovulation-inducing agents is to stimulate monofollicular development to result in a successful singleton pregnancy. Clomiphene citrate, we know, has been available in the past 55 years, though the incidence of ovulation is 60 to 85% cases, but the pregnancy rates are just 10 to 20% cycles. Again, we are aware, but again a brief recap, clomiphene resistant means patients who fail to ovulate despite 6 cycles, and clomiphene failure is patients who do ovulate, but they do not get pregnant, or if they become pregnant, it ends in a miscarriage. We are aware that clomiphene citrate, the action on pituitary hypothalamus is to induce ovulation. However, the effect on endometrium and cervical mucus is detrimental. It leads to a thick viscid mucus, and on the endometrium, there is decreased uterine blood flow, there is reduction in glandular density, and the endometrial thickness remains just up to 6 to 7 millimeters. All of these factors contribute to reduced pregnancy rates and higher miscarriage rates. So then came up letrozole, which is a 3rd generation aromatase inhibitor. Now, these 2 slides, mechanism of action of clomiphene citrate and letrozole, is very interesting. With clomiphene citrate, it binds the estrogen receptors on the hypothalamus and pituitary. Since I already mentioned in my previous slides that estrogen has a negative feedback effect on the hypothalamus pituitary. When clomiphene citrate binds to the estrogen receptors on hypothalamus and pituitary, this negative feedback gets interrupted, due to which there is increased and continuous stimulation of FSH, leading to more and more follicles being recruited, and there is multiple follicular development. With letrozole, this is an aromatase inhibitor. So conversion of testosterone into estrogen at the peripheral level gets inhibited. The levels of estrogen decrease. So again, the negative feedback on hypothalamus pituitary gets interrupted, due to which there is prolonged and continuous secretion of FSH. However, if you see in this slide, up till day 5, the mechanism is just the same, that there is the negative feedback gets interrupted, so there is more of FSH and for a longer time, which recruits more and more of follicles. Now, however, with clomiphene citrate, it has a very long half-life. So once the FSH starts exerting its effect on the follicles and more number of follicles are recruited and they start developing, these in turn secrete, there is synthesis of estrogen. Now this estrogen should exert its negative feedback, which in the case of clomiphene citrate does not happen because of its prolonged half-life. The body still perceives that there is less of estrogen. So the stimulation continues and it leads to multifollicular development. On the other hand, with letrozole, it has a short half-life. So the estrogen being produced by these new follicles, they restore the estrogen negative feedback on the endogenous gonadotrophin, leading to selection of a single follicle, leading to monofollicular development. We are aware that it is given in the dose of 2.5 milligram once a day, starting from day 3 for 5 days. Now, there are many studies. I'm just enumerating a few interesting studies which show that besides its effect on monofollicular development, when compared with clomiphene citrate, especially in patients who were resistant to clomiphene citrate, letrozole combined with gonadotrophins and clomiphene citrate combined with gonadotrophins showed more monofollicular development. That is, the percentage was almost up to 80.2% in the letrozole HMG group when compared to just 65% in the CC-HMG group, and further came down to 54 in the HMG only group. So when it is given in combination with HMG, especially in clomiphene citrate resistant patients of PCOS, there is less dose of HMG required and the risk of hyperstimulation is less. Another interesting study was the effect of letrozole on endometrium. There is increase in interleukin. Now, without going into the details, this improves the implantation rates. It improves the character of the endometrium. Even in patients with endometriosis, it was found that letrozole had a beneficial effect. It restored the intracellular balance between the hormones and the biochemicals, producing a picture which was similar to as found in natural pregnancy. One more positive effect of letrozole was that the incidence of luteinized unruptured follicle was less when compared to clomiphene citrate. So, coming to comparison, the advantages letrozole has over clomiphene citrate, that on estrogen, we are aware that it has thick endometrium and favorable cervical mucus. On the other hand, with clomiphene, there is thin endometrium and also cervical mucus. The uterine blood flow, the miscarriage rates, the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and the multiple pregnancy rates are all comparatively better. As far as the safety profile is concerned, when compared with natural cycle pregnancies and other mishaps like miscarriage, pregnancy, termination, ectopic pregnancies, the incidence was comparatively lower. The live birth rates comparing babies conceived by natural conception and those with ovulation inducing using letrozole were comparable. So, with the use of letrozole, there was no increase in the risk of major congenital anomalies, adverse pregnancy outcomes, or adverse neonatal outcomes. Now, we are aware of one protocol where 2.5 milligrams of letrozole is given starting from day 3, once a day for 5 days. However, there are additional protocols, as we see here, when it is given, especially in patients who are clomiphene resistant. 2.5 milligram of letrozole is given for day 1 and continue for 10 days.
आपकी मर्जी है, भूख लगी।
May I continue? Thank you. So, what happens? When letrozole is given for such a long duration, it leads to continuous production of FSH for a longer time, and the level is maintained above threshold. These FSH allow greater cohort of small follicles to reach maturity, resulting in multifollicular development, ensuring higher pregnancy rate to the tune of 17.4%. The second protocol is when it is given for when you're planning an IUI. In this, 5 milligrams of letrozole. Now here I came to know from one of my IVF specialist friends that 2.5 milligram given BD is better than giving 2.5 milligram OD. The reason I think we should ask Dr. Jyoti Agarwal and Dr. Jyoti Bhaskar. It is given again from day 3 to day 7. Again, the higher dose leads to higher number of follicles because of prolonged and sustained levels of FSH, giving a pregnancy rate of 26.3 when compared to just 2.5 milligram of letrozole being given for 5 days. When it is used as for step-up protocol for assisted reproduction, it is given this way. We start on day 2 of the period. On day 2, 1 tablet is given. On day 3, 2 tablets are given. On day 4, 3 tablets. On day 5, 4 tablets. So in total, 10 tablets are given this way. Again, it prolongs the suppression of estrogen levels, extends the window of elevated endogenous gonadotrophins, resulting in multifollicular development with a mean of 2.2 mature follicles per cycle and achieving a higher pregnancy rate to the tune of 27.2 or 27.3 versus just 11 with the CC group. As far as the summary is concerned, just again a brief recap. Letrozole, when compared with clomiphene citrate, had better pregnancy outcomes and high birth rates. It is very effective in patients who are clomiphene citrate resistant. When used with gonadotrophins, the dose of gonadotrophins is reduced. It leads to monofollicular development, lower multiple pregnancy rates. There is no androgen effect on the endometrium cervical mucus, and because of no risk of hyperstimulation, there are lower cycle cancellation rates. And of course, its safety is well established. So thank you, friends. If there are any questions, we can take them later on. And the second.
Very well presented, Dr. Deepti.